Mainland Portugal is grappling with the aftermath of Storm Kristin, an extreme climatic event that barreled through the country on Wednesday, January 28th, leaving a trail of death, destroyed infrastructure, and nearly 1 million residents without power. As of Thursday evening, authorities have confirmed at least 6 fatalities linked directly to the storm's destructive force, the hardest-hit region, where 4 deaths were reported. Victims included individuals struck by flying metal sheets, a man trapped in a collapsing house structure, and a 34-year-old found in cardiac arrest at a construction site. One person was killed when a tree fell onto their car on the outskirts of Lisbon. 1 fatality was reported in the southern region as the storm moved across the country. Meteorologists from the Portuguese Institute for the Sea and Atmosphere describe the storm as a textbook case of explosive cyclogenesis, with central pressure dropping nearly 30 hectopascals in just 24 hours. A record-shattering gust of 202 kilometers per hour, 125 miles per hour, was recorded in the central municipalities of Coimbra and Figueira da Foz, breaking the previous national record of 176.4 kilometers per hour set during Storm Leslie in 2018. Torrential rain dumped over 70 millimeters in just 6 hours in the Vuga Basin. Along the coast, red alerts were issued for massive swells reaching up to 14 meters in height. The National Emergency and Civil Protection Authority recorded over 5,400 weather-related incidents. At the height of the storm, grid operator Leiria reported that over 1 million customers lost electricity as high-voltage lines were snapped by falling trees and debris. Significant material damage occurred at Monte Real Air Base Number 5, where hangar roofs collapsed, damaging several Portuguese Air Force F-16 fighters. Rail services between Lisbon and Porto were suspended due to debris on the tracks, and hundreds of schools across the central and northern regions remained closed on Thursday. In Figueira da Foz, a Ferris wheel was completely overturned by the wind. The Portuguese government issued a statement expressing heartfelt condolences to the victims' families. Over 3,000 emergency personnel, including firefighters and municipal workers, have been deployed to clear roads and restore essential services. While the storm has now moved eastward into Spain, where it has already caused at least 1 fatality, the IPMA maintains yellow alerts for much of Portugal as cleanup efforts continue. Meanwhile, the central district of Leiria has emerged as the epicenter of destruction following the passage of Storm Kristin, an exceptionally powerful extratropical cyclone that made landfall in the early hours of Wednesday, January 28th. Described by meteorologists as a meteorological bomb, the storm brought hurricane-force winds and torrential rain, resulting in at least 4 fatalities within the district alone and causing catastrophic damage to military and civilian infrastructure. The human cost in Leiria has been the highest in the country. Local authorities and the National Emergency and Civil Protection Authority confirmed 4 deaths in the region. 2 people lost their lives. 1 victim was struck by a flying metal sheet torn from a building, while another was trapped beneath the structural collapse of a residence. An individual was found in cardiac arrest at a construction site as weather conditions reached their peak. In the municipality of Marinha Grande, a 34-year-old man was confirmed dead due to storm-related causes. Leiria was the primary entry point for the storm's sting jet, a localized zone of extremely intense winds. The Portuguese Institute for the Sea and Atmosphere, IPMA, recorded staggering data before monitoring equipment was overwhelmed. Gusts reached 178 kilometers per hour, 110 miles per hour, at the Monte Real Air Base, with other stations in the district, like Ancião, reporting 146 kilometers per hour. The storm's rapid intensification, known as explosive cyclogenesis, caused a massive atmospheric pressure drop, triggering red alerts across the coastline. The facility suffered major structural failure. Massive sections of hangar roofs collapsed, directly impacting several Portuguese Air Force F-16 fighters. Photos from the scene show debris resting on the airframes, though the full extent of the damage to the fleet is still being assessed. A factory roof was entirely destroyed, and high-voltage lines were toppled across the municipality, contributing to the nearly 450,000 residents who remained without power in the central region on Thursday. Cranes were overturned onto vehicles, and emergency teams responded to dozens of calls regarding flooded homes and torn-off roofs. Mayor Gonçalo Lopes described the situation as an extreme climatic event and urged residents to remain cautious during the ongoing cleanup. Local firefighters and civil protection units are working around the clock to clear downed trees and debris that have paralyzed major transport routes, including rail services between Lisbon and Porto, which pass through the district. While the IPMA predicts weather stabilization as the depression moves into Spain, the district of Leiria remains under a yellow alert for rough seas, with waves potentially reaching 14 meters along the coast. Meanwhile, the historic city of Coimbra and its surrounding district are reeling from the catastrophic passage of Storm Kristin. On Wednesday, January 28th, the region witnessed what meteorologists are calling a historic meteorological anomaly, as the storm delivered the highest wind speed ever recorded in mainland Portugal, leaving a trail of collapsed structures, uprooted ancient trees, and a total paralysis of the regional infrastructure. A UNESCO World Heritage Site, the university reported damage to several rooftops and broken windows in historic wings. Large, centuries-old trees in the botanical garden were uprooted, blocking several pedestrian paths. The northern railway line, Linha do Norte, which connects Lisbon to Porto via Coimbra, was suspended indefinitely after overhead power lines were snapped by falling trees. Local grid operator E-Redis reported that tens of thousands of households in the Coimbra district remained in total darkness through Wednesday night as the extreme severity of the storm prevented repair crews from reaching damaged transformers. While the highest number of fatalities occurred in neighboring Leiria, Coimbra reported dozens of injuries caused by flying debris and shattered glass. The National Emergency and Civil Protection Authority coordinated over 1,200 operations within the district alone. Mayor José Manuel Silva described the event as an unprecedented challenge for our municipal services, noting that the priority remains clearing the hundreds of downed trees that have isolated rural parishes within the district. As the IPMA lowers the alert levels to yellow, the focus shifts to damage assessment. The Portuguese government has hinted at declaring a state of calamity for the Coimbra and Leiria districts to expedite emergency funding for the reconstruction of public infrastructure and support for families who have lost their homes. Meanwhile, the northern metropolis of Porto is navigating a complex recovery after Storm Kristin, an explosive extratropical cyclone, slammed into the Atlantic coast on Wednesday, January 28th. While the most tragic loss of life occurred in the central regions, Porto faced a relentless assault from record-breaking sea swells and hurricane-force gusts that have left the city's coastal districts and transportation networks in a state of emergency. The Portuguese Institute for the Sea and Atmosphere, IPMA, placed Porto under a maximum red alert for maritime agitation throughout Wednesday. The storm generated waves with an average height of 7 to 8 meters, with peak swells reaching a terrifying 14 meters. In the coastal area of Foz, the Atlantic breached sea defenses, flooding riverside roads and damaging several seaside esplanadas, terraces, and businesses. Authorities were forced to cordon off the Avenida de Dom Carlos I to prevent vehicles and pedestrians from being swept away by the surges. High winds, which peaked at nearly 140 kilometers per hour in the Porto metropolitan area, caused widespread urban disruption. The National Emergency and Civil Protection Authority, ANEPC, recorded hundreds of incidents in the Porto district, primarily involving fallen trees and displaced masonry from older buildings in the Ribeira district. In neighboring Vila Nova de Gaia, across the Douro River, the famous port wine cellars faced minor flooding and wind damage to roofs, forcing a temporary halt to tourist activities. While central Portugal suffered the most blackouts, Porto was not spared. Thousands of residents in the suburbs of Maia and Matosinhos lost electricity as local distribution lines were downed by flying debris. The state-owned rail company, Comboios de Portugal, CP, suspended all long-distance services on the northern line, Linha do Norte, between Porto Campanha and Lisbon, due to fallen trees and power line damage. Officials stated that full service might not return until Friday. Several flights scheduled to land at Francisco Sá Carneiro Airport, OPO, were diverted or cancelled due to extreme crosswinds, leaving hundreds of travelers stranded. Prime Minister Luis Montenegro, who visited the National Emergency and Civil Protection Authority, emphasized that the north remains under close monitoring due to high soil saturation. While the worst of the wind has passed, the government has declared a situation of calamity for the most affected regions to mobilize emergency funds for reconstruction. Porto's municipal services are currently prioritizing the clearing of secondary roads and the inspection of structural safety for schools, many of which remained closed as a precaution. As the winds of Storm Kristin finally subside, Portugal is beginning to tally the staggering cost of what is being described as the most destructive climatic event of the decade. With a death toll currently standing at 6, the focus has shifted to the massive economic and structural destruction that has left nearly 1 million people in darkness and crippled the nation's industrial and military sectors. In the industrial zones of Marinha Grande, several glass and plastics factories suffered total roof failures. Estimates suggest that the damage to specialized machinery, ruined by exposure to torrential rain after structural collapses, could exceed €250 million. In Figueira da Foz, the destruction of the iconic Ferris wheel and the leveling of dozens of beachfront restaurants have dealt a severe blow to the local tourism economy. Initial reports from the Confederação do Turismo de Portugal suggest a loss of over €50 million in tourism-related infrastructure along the central coast. The collapse of hangar roofs has caused significant material damage to several F-16 fighting Falcons. Given that a single F-16 can cost between $20 million and $60 million depending on its upgrade status, the repair or replacement costs for these strategic assets could run into the hundreds of millions. The Portuguese Air Force is currently conducting an emergency audit to determine how many aircraft remain operational, as this base is a critical component of NATO's Atlantic air defense. Grid operator E-Redis faces a logistical nightmare. Over 1 million customers lost power at the peak of the storm. Hundreds of high-voltage towers were bent or snapped by the 202 km/h winds. The cost to modernize and repair the grid is estimated by experts to be around €400 million. The Linha do Norte, Northern Railway line, suffered extensive damage to its catenary systems. With the suspension of high-speed trains between Lisbon and Porto, the daily economic loss from halted commerce and logistics is estimated at €12 million per day. Thousands of hectares of eucalyptus and pine forests, essential for Portugal's paper and pulp industry, were leveled. In the western Oeste region, pear and apple orchards have seen their structures destroyed, with early estimates from farmers' unions suggesting over €100 million in losses. Economists and insurance adjusters are already projecting that the total bill for Storm Kristin, combining public infrastructure, private property, and lost productivity, could exceed €1.5 billion to €2 billion.
Continua a subir no Portugal. Nós tivemos a maré cheia às 8h40.